Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Mercury Weather and Steamclock. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. Federico is fresh off of the Roman Comic-Con. He's getting his steps in today, from what I
am
understand.
exhausted. 20,000 steps. I just want to lie down and sleep.
All right. Well, we'll have another espresso, and you and I will get our way through App Stories today. I wanted to start before we get to the main topic of the day in mentioning some follow-up, because we got a lot of good recommendations from folks of text editors that we heard from, on social media and email.
Okay.
But I also want to mention one that I discovered from a developer in Italy who is the same person, Fabrizio, who's behind Typefully, which is a social media scheduling app. Basically, It works with a bunch of different services. But he's working on something called Cognio, which is a markdown
Oh, come on. Say it right, John.
You tell me. I know
It's Latin. It's cogito.
Oh, okay.
Cogito.
There's no T in it, though.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Not in the name that he.
No, you sent me this yesterday.
Oh, did I write it in the show notes wrong?
Let me see.
Oh, you're right. It's cogito. You're right. I'm sorry.
It means to think.
Yes, no, I understand that, and I also have I wrote it wrong in our show notes. That's on me. But it's a cool little app. It's Markdown text editor that works. It's different than Obsidian and Bear and all those things. It's got a great design. It uses some of the same open source fonts that were designed by the IA Writer folks. It also makes it very easy to do things like copy the absolute or relative paths of documents, which is handy if you're using your text editor with an AI agent. It's still in beta, but it's a public beta right now, so I'll put a link in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Yeah, I've only been using it for a day or two, but I wrote one of my recent articles in it and enjoyed it a lot. But one of the things that I liked about it, and these are like really small things, but you can put a destination in the sidebar, and I put my Obsidian Vault in there, so I had access to all those. But I could also then open things that were in different locations. One of the limitations of Obsidian is that something has to be designated a vault in order to be accessible in the app, whereas in Cogito, you can have a dedicated folder like a vault, but you can also pick up things in your downloads folder or your documents folder or wherever they are. So that's one thing that I really like about it.
Nice. Yeah, I gotta check it out.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Mercury Weather. Mercury Weather is a thoughtfully designed weather app that shows all the essential weather details at a glance. It has a gorgeous, colorful interface that dynamically adapts to the conditions. With a warm orange palette on a sunny day, icy tones on a cold day, and deep blue on those rainy nights, Mercury has a glanceable chart layout to present the hourly and daily forecast in a way that feels intuitive right away. It has a really cool feature for frequent travelers, too. Mercury's trip forecast feature automatically shows you the weather at your destination right in your daily forecast timeline, so you always see the weather where you'll be, not where you are. I've been using Mercury Weather since the very beginning when it first came out as a 1.0, and it's a fantastic app. Not only do I use the trip forecast, but I also use the watch complications because I think it's one of the most legible, best designed weather watch complications out there. It's absolutely fantastic. When the weather gets serious, Mercury offers storm and hurricane tracking too, with maps, live positions, forecast paths, cones, and intensity. Plus, it has widgets, so you can keep tabs on a specific storm or the closest one right from your home screen. Mercury Weather's gorgeous interface makes it delightful to check the weather every day, even on gray, rainy ones. The app's business model is simple: no ads and no selling user data. Mercury is available on all Apple platforms minus tvOS. You can download it, use the standard features for free, or upgrade to Mercury Premium to unlock all features. Just go to mercuryweather.app/appstories to download Mercury Weather now. Use the link in the show notes to let them know that you came from AppStories. That's mercuryweather.app/appstories. Try it out. Get all the standard features for free. Our thanks to Mercury Weather for their support of the show. So, Federico, today I want to talk about everything apps. And, longtime listeners know that we talk a lot about everything apps because, and not just everything apps, but everything apps as opposed to single purpose or focused apps. And the thing that really brought this back to me was the announcement about a week ago, a little over a week ago as this goes out, that OpenAI is building themselves an everything app. They did a big press release. They announced $122 billion of funding, which is a lot of money. And they had this paragraph towards the end of the press release that I just want to read because it kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about, which is it goes on to say, that is why we are building a unified AI super app. As models become more capable, the limiting factor shifts from the intelligence to usability. All right, to usability. Users do not want disconnected tools. They want a single system that can understand intent, take action, and operate across applications, data, and workflows. Our super app will bring together ChatGPT, Codex, browsing, and our broader agentic capabilities into one agent-first experience. This is not just product simplification. It is the distribution and deployment strategy.
Okay.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack with that, I think. A lot.
Yeah. First of all, obviously this is what they think their users want, right?
Yes, that is.
And I also wanna highlight how, arguably you could say that Anthropic also has this idea of the super app in place right now because you open Claude and especially on iOS, right? You look at Claude on iOS and you have Claude, you have Code, you have Dispatch inside. You open Claude on the Mac, you have 3 tabs for Chat, Co-work, and Code. So Anthropic is already sort of meshing multiple experiences into the same product. This sounds to me like, obviously, when you consider OpenAI and ChatGPT, we're talking at a very different scale, right? Almost 1 billion users. ChatGPT is this global phenomenon that has basically become synonymous with AI for billions of people, hundreds of billions of people. And I think it's interesting that they think, when they say we think our users want a single unified experience, I don't think the almost 1 billion people using ChatGPT are there thinking, oh, I wish I could also code inside ChatGPT, or oh, I wish I could also browse the web inside ChatGPT, right? It seems to me like OpenAI is trying to justify the fact that they want to go after the market that Anthropic is so successfully tapping into when it comes to the enterprise, when it comes to businesses paying for API access, paying for Claude Code, and paying for Claude agents now. So it seems to me like OpenAI is trying to say, well, we basically want to, they're trying to say we want to copy the Anthropic approach without saying that explicitly.
I think that's a big part of it. I think that's absolutely right. I think too, though, that part of this goes back to, if you think maybe a year ago, OpenAI was very boldly saying that they were going to replace your operating system essentially. And they came out with their own app store. That app store has really gone nowhere. It's essentially, I think it's still there. I don't even know if I would know how to get to it if I tried, but it's there, but it's not, my sense is it's not making developers money, and they haven't really taken over and replaced the app store that you find, either the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store. So I think what they're trying, in part of what they're saying is, all right, we're going to move up the stack. we realize we're not going to be your operating system, but maybe we can be the only app that you ever use. We can be the app that sits on top of your operating system and you never have to go anywhere ever again. And that reminds me an awful lot of Facebook. And especially given the fact that their CEO of applications until recently, she's now the CEO of AGI deployment, I think.
AGI deployment.
Whatever that means. But she came from Facebook. And I think that there's a very Facebook-like approach to apps and engagement happening at OpenAI right now.
Now, we discussed this many, many years ago, right at the beginning of AppStories. With all these companies, there's always the push and pull over time of unification and then specialization. Like first, they try to launch a bunch of experiments, right? You look at Facebook as it was known at the time. Now it's Meta, but then it was just Facebook. And they had so many discrete experiments. Remember Facebook Paper, for example?
Oh, yeah.
It was supposed to be this.
That was an acquisition of a developer who did like an iOS API, right?
Mike Mattis. And, they were working at Push Pop Press, I think. One of the most impressive iPad demos I've ever seen, I think. So Facebook at the time, they were launching all of these discrete, self-contained, standalone experiences, right? And there were at least 3 or 4 other standalone Facebook apps that you could download on the iPhone. And over time, they were all discontinued. And over time, everything was brought together into this massive experience that Facebook has become. I don't know if you've opened Facebook recently, John. I have an account. I never check it. Every once in a while, I open it because somebody's wishing me a happy birthday or something. And it's got so many things, right? It's this messy town square of all kinds of things. There's Facebook Marketplace now. There's for a time, I'm not sure if it still exists or not. There was Facebook Dating at some point.
Really, that one I didn't know about.
And obviously, I think the only standalone experience that has survived at this point is probably Facebook Messenger. That still has the dedicated application. But all these companies, they always have a tendency to split up into a bunch of experiments. And they also have the tendency to realize, now it's too confusing. Now we need to bring everything back into the most popular app that everybody uses. And so I think you're right. I think OpenAI probably had the same realization. They realized, well, ChatGPT is so popular. Codex is having a moment, right? So why don't we bring ChatGPT and Codex together into the same app? And while we're at it, we'll throw in Atlas, the browser.
Since no one's using it as a standalone app for the most part.
I do understand. I kind of understand the principle of it.
Yeah.
I don't understand the practicality of it. Because let's take it at face value, right? They're saying that they're going to do a super app with all of these things together. How's it going to work? You're going to open ChatGPT and you're going to say, I want to go to MacStories.net? Is that the idea? You're going to open ChatGPT and there's going to be multiple sections and one of them is browse and you're going to say, well, I want to open 9to5 Mac. And so I'm going to tap on the ChatGPT icon. Then I'm going to switch to web browser and then I'm going to type 9to5 Mac and I'm going to visit 9to5 Mac. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah. It's hard to know what exactly is going on. I think, I don't want to dump too hard on the Everything app in the sense that I do think that it has been done well in some certain contexts. I kind of view Notion as an Everything app in a lot of ways.
I was going to get to that.
Right?
Yes.
I think Notion has done this in a way that works. And I think, it's interesting to kind of explore and think about why is it that Notion seems okay when the idea of throwing all this OpenAI stuff in one app is not okay. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were suggesting that Anthropic should split some of their stuff out into at least a couple of apps. Why are these contexts different? And I think it comes down to, for Notion, that it is fundamentally an app about organizing data in different formats. as opposed to what these AI companies are trying to do, which is they're trying to do a lot of different things. They're trying to browse, which is kind of a research tool. They're trying to do something akin to search. They're doing a lot and work with documents. It's just a lot to throw into one thing, which is why I think actually, no, when I think about it too, as I'm saying this, Notion, I think, I sometimes wonder whether Notion AI is too much off to the side in Notion, because it is a really valuable tool. On the other hand, it is very different than the core of Notion. I think that they've been wise to kind of ease into moving Notion AI more into the product over time, because it's the kind of thing that could really disrupt the experience. But I don't think it has. I think they've done an actually very good job with it in Notion.
Yeah, I think Notion is an interesting example because they are a practical, actually successful example of an everything app at the moment, where you have, you can use Notion as a in single player mode, like I do for many of my notes, many of my articles. You can use it in a shared environment, and it's about text, it's about images, it's about database, it's about collaboration. Then they have Notion Calendar, which itself was an acquisition. Then they have Notion Mail, which, if I'm not mistaken, was also an acquisition, I think. And they have this integration now. If you open Notion on your Mac, you have this sidebar with multiple, again, segmented controls. Everybody's doing them these days. You have your home, you have your Notion AI, you have the calendar, the meetings, and you have your notifications and search. So it is a crowded experience, but I think they're trying their best to make it make sense. What I think is fascinating about Notion is that they're one of the more interesting companies to follow right now when it comes to building agents. Because they have, the way I see it, they have this massive product with all kinds of experiences inside, right? You can take notes, you can write content, you can share documents, you can create databases, and everything can be linked. You can record meetings, and when you record the meeting is actually a note, or a page, as they call it in Notion.
Right.
And so they have that sort of infrastructure in place. And then on the side, it's almost like they're building, it's obviously a second revenue stream, right? Because they're going to charge for Notion AI. But the Notion AI itself is kind of complicated because you can effectively use it in three ways, right? They talked about this yesterday. We're recording this on Thursday. And on Wednesday, they announced this third way to use Notion AI. So you're going to have your Notion AI. That's what they're going to start charging for in May to build your custom agents. Then you can obviously use the Notion MCP in Claude or Perplexity, whatever. But then they're also going to embrace, and it's in private alpha right now, this thing called Claude Managed Agents, which I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details right now.
They're
but
cloud-based, right?
They're cloud-based agents where Anthropic runs the harness, runs the structure around the agent, and the agent works with your data from Notion. And it seems to me like Notion AI hasn't even fully launched yet, right? But it's already kind of confusing because you have these custom agents that are proprietary to Notion, but then you can also choose to use the agents managed by Anthropic. That's the risk, I think, to zoom out for a second. That's the risk of the everything app, right? That you're doing so many things at once that they can be confusing when they're presented in the same UI, and that you can overwhelm people with options, and that you don't tell a clear product story anymore.
Right.
I think the one thing that Notion is doing right from this perspective is they have their main Notion app, and they have these integrations. You can see your meetings coming from Notion Calendar. You can fetch your emails coming from Notion Mail, but they also have the standalone apps. I have it in my doc. There's Notion Calendar. You can put it in your doc. And so it's almost like they're infusing the main Notion app with some parts of the other experiences, but you can still get those other experiences as standalone products. There's an app for Notion Mail and there's an app for Notion Calendar. So I kind of wonder if maybe OpenAI is going to do something similar, like that maybe Codex and Atlas are not going to go away as standalone apps, but parts of them will be embedded within ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And I think one of the things that Notion has done well too is that they have Notion AI, at least in beta right now, as a separate standalone iOS
Also
app.
that.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it would be crowded to put that in the mobile interface. And I think where Notion, their biggest risk right now probably is with the main app on the desktop, because it is really complex now. There's a lot of pieces, a lot of moving pieces to it. But they just introduced like a tabbing thing in the sidebar, which I think cleans up the sidebar quite a bit. The sidebar can, if you have a lot of data in Notion, can become quite a big mess, but having tabs at the top makes a big difference. So it's evolving, I think, in a way that has kept it working well. I do think you're right that there is an opportunity probably for these AI companies to do something similar like that, where you could have an everything desktop app, but you could still have some sort of things that get peeled off for the mobile experience, for instance, like things like dispatch and remote control and that sort of thing.
Yeah. The other risk that I see right now is that I actually think that the idea of building the super app or the everything app right now is going to be something that more companies will try to do. Mostly because it's like, I could call it the why not problem. Because right now you have all these AIs that are writing code for you, and you're like, well, why not? I mean, why not, also add a browser inside here? Did you see that Todoist is kind of teasing that they're going to launch a product called Todoist Automations?
No, I didn't see that.
It looks like their own versions of Zapier. Like where
Oh.
you're going to connect a bunch of tools and you're going to have, like, that's obviously something very different from a task manager, right?
Yeah.
But that to me seems like maybe the beginning of a trend where
That's what
these companies
Shortwave did, right? Remember Shortwave did
Yes.
Tasklet?
Yeah, it's almost like I have a feeling that more companies, they can write code so much faster than before, and they can ship products so much more quickly than before, that everybody will. It's almost like everybody's building the same thing, right? Everybody's building agents. Everybody's building these connectors. We're basically all taking advantage of this technology to build the same thing. But how do you balance that with offering products that can become as popular as ChatGPT? Or let me phrase it another way. If 3 years ago ChatGPT launched and it had 5 different experiences inside of it, would have it become so popular?
No.
Or was it the simplicity that actually made it so
I
popular?
think it was the simplicity, and then it was like using, WeChat or iMessage. I mean, it was like, yeah, I don't know. I think it was because it was just a simple chat interface that people were used to from text messaging.
And here's another thought experiment. You could argue that Apple and Google are actually going to be first to build and ship at scale an everything app.
Called Siri, right?
Yes, because if judging by the rumors that are going around in terms of what Apple is going to do, if Apple actually ships as a new Siri with an AI integration that you invoke it via voice or via text, since they're going to do a chatbot, and that AI can actually talk and interact with all of the apps on your device, well, isn't that an everything app? And at that point, that also begs the question, well, the OS is the everything app, which by definition is what it is, right? It's an operating system with a bunch of apps. So it's almost like we're going to go full circle back to square one at this point. I find this topic so interesting because, like I said, it's a very confusing landscape, but some things are easy to identify. And one of them is that everybody's building the same thing. That I think is the common truth right now. Everybody is building the same thing. It's AI, it's agents, it's speeding up your work, integrating with a bunch of your apps, and sort of bringing it all together under the AI umbrella. Everybody's doing that right now. But if everybody's doing that, what happens when the actual platform maker, so Apple and Google mostly, Microsoft maybe to an extent.
Copilot.
Well, yeah, sure. I gotta tell you, quick parenthesis. I was watching the latest episode of High Potential, excellent police procedural TV show on Hulu. And at one point, they're at the precinct and they're doing this investigation, and there's this product placement where they're investigating this con man, and one of the detectives is like, "Oh, let me look it up on Copilot." On Copilot, she actually goes for 30 seconds. Like, in Copilot, you can plug in a bunch of data sources, and you can I swear that's what she's saying, and you can color code all of these con man locations by city. And Copilot lets it. And I was like, oh my god, this is like the worst product placement I've ever seen for Copilot.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the question: what happens when the platform maker realizes, well, we are the everything app because we have the OS, we have the apps, and we have the AI layer. So would you rather have a super app experience by tapping the ChatGPT icon in your dock, or would you have a super app experience by pressing a side button on your phone?
I think you're better off with the platform vendor. I mean, just because the hooks are going to be deeper by definition.
That's my thought. Like, I see this newfound momentum toward let's build everything inside one place, but you're exposing yourself to this huge risk of the platform vendor doing the same and doing it better to a much wider extent that you could possibly hope for. Because at that point, if you're OpenAI and you realize, well, okay, now we got to build an email client, and we got to build a calendar, and we got to build a music player, which is what they kind of tried to do with the ChatGPT App Store. Yeah. I don't know if you saw that report in Bloomberg a couple of weeks ago. Basically, nobody's using it. They wanted to have this big moment, like we're going after the App Store, but it didn't work, and it's not working.
Yeah. It's all connected because it's like they want to be the OS, but they can't be the OS. So they're going to build a web app, and they're going to get people to build plugins because plugins are a way to leverage a community to build the things that you can't build. It reminds me even of this story that came out as part of the Apple 50th, where Steve Jobs at one point wanted Scott Forstall to put together a giant group of developers and make all the apps they could possibly imagine that people might want for the iPhone, because they were going to do it all in-house and not have third-party developers do it. I mean, that's kind of, the problem, right? It's like, you don't want to be the company that has to do the music app and the email app and the calendar app and the spreadsheet and the text editor. I mean, it's a lot.
Yep. So I would rather see these companies, focus on what they do best, which is making models. I understand making a standalone product for programmers like Codex or Cloud Code, like that I understand.
Yeah.
But the moment the pitch becomes, well, now you can live your life inside ChatGPT, or you can have all of these different experiences inside ChatGPT, such as you're browsing the web or reading your email. Like, no, I don't want to do that.
It has to be the pitch, though, doesn't it? Because they've raised so much money. The stakes are so high now that they need to be your everything app in order for them to actually be successful, because they've taken on so much funding.
I guess that's the problem, but I feel like ultimately, as long as all these companies are ultimately bound to the fact that these experiences do not exist in a digital vacuum in our brains. They exist on physical devices that we hold in our hands, right? It's not like I close my eyes and I use ChatGPT. No, I gotta grab a computer and I gotta grab a phone and I gotta use ChatGPT, right? So as long as these companies are bound to this or this computer that I'm using right now, there's always going to be the latent risk of Apple or Google saying, well, we're actually going to do that also, and we're going to do it better because we're going to have a deeper system integration that ChatGPT in your dock will never have, right? Yeah. So that's the sort of everything app pitch that is much more interesting from my perspective, because I would like to press a button and have Siri understand everything on my phone, while also, still being able to tap an icon on my home screen to read my email,
Right.
or edit some text. So that, I think, the biggest risk to these companies was always Apple and Google, and again, to an extent, Microsoft. And I don't think that's going to change. I think you're right. I think they have to try because of all the money they've raised, but they fully know that the biggest threat is the platform vendor. And in all of this, right now, from my perspective, the biggest winner is Google, because they have the platform and because they also cut a deal with Apple to be a provider.
Yep.
That's what's the expression? Have your cake and eat it too.
Yep.
Best of both worlds. If you succeed, you have the platform with Gemini integration. If you don't, you become a vendor for somebody else.
Yeah, it's kind of search all over again, really. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
playbook when you really come down to it. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Steamclock. A lot of mobile apps are mediocre. Not broken, just okay. But you notice the difference the moment you use something good. Steamclock software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They're a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they've been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but don't have the in-house team to build something great. Steamclock works with companies to level up their app so that they can go from it's holding us back to it's pulling its weight. Some of their clients have discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way to the App Store isn't a product strategy. What makes Steamclock worth calling isn't just that they execute well. It's that they'll help you figure out the right approach and give you an honest read on your situation before you commit to anything. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they've helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares as much as you do, Steamclock is where to start. Visit steamclock.com/appstories to get in touch. Again, that's steamclock.com/appstories. Our thanks to Steamclock for their support of the show. Well, Federico, before we go, I just want to get a quick take from you on this TBPN acquisition that OpenAI did, which, for people who are not familiar, this is a video podcast that has been around for about 18 months that largely covers AI very extensively and just Silicon Valley in general. When you look at it, according to, I think it was the Financial Times, it was purchased by OpenAI for the low hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that the assumption is somewhere in the range of $150 million. If you look at their YouTube channel, it has, I think it's 70,000 subscribers. Not a lot for a company that was bought for over $100 million and supposedly made last year $5 million in ad revenue. But I think that if you just go by YouTube, you're probably kind of missing the point, because where people are actually watching this is on X, because they've got 350,000 followers on X. And I believe that that's where a lot of the audience is picking this up. Plus, they're preaching to the choir. They are a show that is broadcasting to a very niche audience that has a lot of money. And I think that is all part of this. But I'm just curious what you think OpenAI is doing, buying a video podcast for a lot of money that still, even if you count that Twitter audience, seems like a lot for what it is.
You've never bleeped me on the show before, John. Can you bleep me?
I will bleep you.
Much respect to the TBPN guys. I mean, obviously,
Yeah, we got nothing against those guys. They've been successful.
From OpenAI's perspective, this acquisition is bull. John, I'm sorry, but this is they've basically become a glorified PR for them at this point. Who's gonna listen to a podcast? I mean, who's going to listen to a podcast that clearly belongs to a company, right? I'm not saying that they're suddenly become spokespeople for OpenAI, but how much money did they take again from OpenAI?
150 million. It's by some estimates.
The moment you take 150 million from anybody, are you gonna speak ill of anybody?
Yeah.
No, you're not gonna do that.
I think that there's...
And look, I understand it's human nature not to do that.
I think that there's a broader thing going on here where there is this Silicon Valley, the media hates us now. So
it's they acquired a show with an established audience on X that tends to have constructive and positive conversations about AI. Let me ask you, would you keep listening to AppStories or ATP or Upgrade if Apple acquired all of them?
Right.
I wouldn't. I mean, look, I would take the money. Like, I would take $150 million, right? But let's not fool ourselves. You're becoming a PR conduit for that company. Because with that much money involved, if there's a scandal involving Sam Altman, and there tends to be one every
so often, yeah.
Would you cover it? And you're the host of TBPN. Would you, in all consciousness, actually cover it and investigate and dig deeper on that scandal while also being on the payroll of OpenAI?
Yeah. No, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And if not, look, and if not, and those guys are actually going to do it. They're actually going to remain objective and they're going to report on all the bad things that OpenAI does. Like, so maybe I'm wrong and those guys will do it. Then the question becomes, well, why did OpenAI acquire them?
Right. Well, that's why I think ultimately they will part ways, just like a lot of big acquisitions like this happen with media companies. That there's probably some kind of lockup period, just like when companies get acquired in tech in general, and then eventually they'll go do something else, whether it's TBPN 2 or whatever.
Yeah, look, it's money. Everybody likes money, and everybody likes $150 million.
I find it fascinating though, just because it seems so extreme, and I think that there are some explanations for why it's so extreme, which we've kind of touched on, but in the end, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, even if you recognize that there are some things at play. I think a lot of it just is part of the fact that there's so much money sloshing around in the AI world right now that $150 million to OpenAI is literally nothing. It's like you and I writing a check for $100 or something. Yeah. It's like it's nothing. So. All right, Federico, good conversation today. I really enjoyed it. We've got more to talk about in the post show. We're gonna be doing that. We're gonna be doing that real soon. So stick around for that. In the meantime, I want to thank our sponsors. That was Mercury Weather and Steamclock. And you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. I'll talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.